Alright, today we're going to talk about lesson 371. 371 is actually a really kind of easy, fun lesson. In my opinion, I know hearing that from a math teacher should probably scare you all to death, but it's really not that bad as long as you learn a few key pieces of notation. So what we're going to talk about today is that we're going to talk about more about functions. Of course, functions are relations in which each element in the domain is mapped to exactly one element in the range, right? In other words, for every x, there's only one y. In order to understand how functions are related, we need to understand how to perform different arithmetic operations on functions. In this lesson, we will add, subtract, multiply, divide, exponential, and linear functions. It sounds complicated. I promise it's not that bad. All right. So here's the key pieces of information you need to know. If you are, whether it's linear or exponential, if you have f plus g of x, that means f of x plus g of x. You're adding the two functions together. Basically, you're combining like terms. Okay. Same deal with subtraction. F minus g of x is f of x minus g of x. And we'll show you what that means in just a second. But remember this notation because you'll see it a lot. The next one is multiplication. That is not to be confused with something called f of g of x, which is something that you'll do maybe next year, probably next year in 10th grade. But this is f times g of x. So f of x times g of x function. And then lastly, we have division, which is exactly what it seems like. It's just like the others. F of x times g of x, or divided by g of x. Okay? The thing to make sure you're paying attention to is this. For addition and multiplication, it really doesn't matter which order you put them in, because remember, multiplication is commutative, and so is addition. However, when you're doing this one, the subtraction or the division, make sure you do them in the right order. F of x has to come first, then g of x. Or it could say g minus f of x, which in that case it would flip-flop those. So make sure you pay close attention to that. All right, let's look at some examples. All right, example 1. If f of x is 3x plus 2, so f of x is 3x plus 2, and g of x is 2x minus 7, then what's the result of adding those two functions? What is f plus g of x? So f plus g of x is f of x plus g of x. So we simply substitute each part in. So f of x is 3x plus 2, and then we're going to add g of x, which is 2x minus 7. Okay? Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Combine like terms. F plus g of x is 5x minus 5. Okay? You could factor out, you pull that 5 back out, but it's not necessary. We'll leave it like that for now. So there's your example for 1. And that's your final answer. Right? We're just getting a new equation. All right? Now, what happens if we multiply? F of x is 3 to the x power, g of x is 5. So f of x, that'd be f times g of x would be f of x times, times g of x. Okay? So what we want to do is f times g of x equals 3 to the x power times 5. Now, we can leave it like that, that's fine, but generally speaking, we can rearrange this. It would be written in a different order. You would generally write that as 5 times 3 to the x power. Basically, this becomes your initial value, and then 3 is still your base. What you cannot do, and I've said repeatedly, and I still see some people trying to do it, what you cannot do is do 5 times 3 and make that a 15 to the x power. Repeatedly multiplying by 15 is much different than repeatedly multiplying by 3 and then multiplying one time by 5. Please do not make that mistake. All right, so that is f times g of x. Okay? All right, moving on. Here we're subtracting. So f minus g of x is going to be f of x minus g of x. Okay? And so that's going to be That's going to be 2x minus 3. I'm going to put parentheses this time. You'll see why in a second. Minus g of x, which is 4x minus 11. Now, what's the thing that I can't forget to do here? I have to remember to distribute this negative all the way through that second term. All right? So, that is 2x minus 3 minus 4x plus 11. It has to go through both of them. And then from there, it's just a combined like term sort of deal. All right? So, that's f minus g of x equals 2x 2 minus 4, which is negative 2x, and then negative 3 plus 11 would be 8. So plus 8. That's your final answer. Okay? All right. One more example. What about division? So this one would be f divided by g of x. And I'll show you another way you could see it written. And so what does that mean? That means f of x divided by g of x. You're a little bit less likely to see this one, but you could see this. You could see f over g of x. Right? It means the same thing. Fraction, division, same thing. All right, so if we do that, that would be 2 to the x power over 2 divided by 2. Now, I want to bring up something real quick here. We should recognize this as being a power rule because remember, this is 2 to the what power? The bottom here. The bottom of that fraction is 2 to the first, right? We have the same base and we're dividing. We had that lesson over power rules back in the earlier part of the year. You got to remember. So this could be rewritten as 2 to the x minus 1. And again, that would be f divided by g of x. Okay, and again, remember, you can write it either way. So that's the same thing. All right. So that is that one fully simplified. Like I said, this lesson is not too bad. So hopefully it'll go pretty quick for you. Okay, make sure you ask me if you have any questions.